So, our conversation today is about the intersection between music and tech, which is obviously a huge topic, and we've picked a point within it. And what we are going to talk about is data mining. So, if you don't know, data mining is the process of finding patterns by looking at big sets of data. And as consumers, we are obviously all contributing to the big data of music all the time by very obviously downloading music, using apps like Spotify, and maybe less obviously by our internet activity. So, what music related things are you Googling? What's your social media activity like? Which artists are you following on Instagram? What YouTube videos are you watching over and over again? Billboard even has a social 50 chart now that just tracks the social media presence of different artists. So, to get right into it, what we will start with, and Madeline, I'll start by asking you from your perspective in indie labels and artist management, how much of an influence is data mining on things in artist management, from representation to finding new artists to music production?
Wow. So I'll take it back a little bit to when I started and worked with Jimmy Iovine at Interscope Records and worked with Michael Jackson and some really amazing people. It honestly didn't mean anything from the label and management perspective, because it really was all about how much money the label could spend to make the artist cool, right? And to make the best record and to spend on advertising to make sure that the world saw the artist. And over the past, I want to say actually 15 years, because people haven't been living in reality about it until very recently, things changed drastically, right? The entire terrain changed, playing field changed, and I think shifted in favor of the artist, right? So when the point of entry got so wide open for artists to be able to use certain kinds of platforms to present themselves, like YouTube and like SoundCloud, you then saw kids doing this thing that kids want to do, right? They want to discover on their own. They don't want it to be fed to them. They don't want it to be spoon-fed. They want to find it, and then they want to tell their friend about it, and then they tell more friends about it, and then all of a sudden, you've got some kid who hasn't done anything except make some great music and upload it to SoundCloud or to YouTube. He is one of the most popular kids in the world, and they don't have a record deal until the label figures out that they're one of the most popular kids in the world. So from the label and management perspective, data mining has become crucial, right? I mean, even if you consider, there's a label, 300 Entertainment, Lior Cohen's label, right? Lior partnered with Twitter, right? So all of these announcements came out about it, and it seemed like a lot of people missed it. But Twitter gave 300 complete access to all this data. So they suddenly knew who's listening to what's trending on Twitter, where it's trending, where people care about these artists. So they didn't only know which artists to go after, and they did go after them, and they did sign them, but they knew where they should perform, where they would sell records, right? So with that information, they built, like it was a gold mine, a complete gold mine. Like they built the label off of that. And kudos to them for figuring out before a lot of other people how to use data mining in a way that could really be effective and figure out how to serve an audience like authentically what they want, what they were already searching for, what they were already retweeting, what they were already listening to. So I think when you use it in a way that you're not only figuring out for your own self as a business, because selfishly, I use it to figure out where should my artists be performing? Where are they going to be able to sell records? Who's listening to them? Who can I get to listen to them? But the other side of it, and Scott, we talked about it earlier, the other side of it is, how do you use that to super serve the audience? How do you use it to actually make a difference by giving people what they want, right? And another big piece of it for us, to be very transparent, is how do we use it to figure out how to convince, because artists don't make so much money selling music anymore as they used to, right? They make money touring, and they make money with brand partnerships, and hopefully with authentic types of brand partnerships. So how do we use that kind of information to convince brands that we're the artist for them, right?
That sounds like a good question for Scott, or a good point for you to come in with brand partnerships and all that data stuff.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. I think there's brands, I think, there are a lot of brands that are interested in certainly reach, eyeballs, numbers, and I think one of the areas of that isn't looked at as much by certain brands is quality of those ears and those eyeballs. So, finding 1 million people following an artist is one thing, but finding 1 million people following an artist that will care about a certain brand or this certain personality of that brand or that product is critical. So when a brand is looking at eyeballs alone, there's a great opportunity to miss, to go off the rails, and to not reach the right demographic. And one of the things we talked about sort of in the back room was that what works in the United States might work in a different way in France or in Australia, et cetera. And so understanding the audience, I think there's so much data out there, just like the YouTubes, et cetera, of the world there's so much content. There's so much information. One of the key factors to success, I think, for a brand, for an artist, or even consumer to have the best experience is being able to filter through that information and to really find the most compelling aspects that relate to them.
He's absolutely right. Filtering through is, you made one point that I love. So I will find and follow someone that's got 1 million followers, right? And it took brands a minute to get savvy about this because the brands were going for like the 1 million followers. And they finally caught on, but how many people engaged, right? How many of those 1 million actually engaged? How many of those people would be moved to click to purchase something because that artist posted about it, right? So if you got somebody with 1 million followers and there's maybe 10 people that are going to pay attention to your product because this artist said so, and you just spent $1 million to work with this artist, you got a problem. And a lot of brands were doing that. But they have gotten savvy about that. And then that comes back to figuring out the right way to use data mining, figuring out what the actual information is that you want to be taking in, because it shouldn't be as simple as this person appears to be the most popular artist. It really should be when this person says something about women's empowerment, when this artist says something about women's empowerment, do 10,000 people like her post? Genuine people, right? And so then when you get the 10,000 likes, how many people commented though? Because did we buy the likes? Or did we get 1,000 of those 10,000 that actually said, yes, girl, or like put up like the hands, right? So when you get to where you can dig that deep and you can realize that there is an authenticity to the following, then you really know as a brand that you could work with somebody who could represent your brand and people are going to react, right?
Yeah, I think that's huge, and I think that's that's a make or break. So I spent a little time one-on-one with the head of hip-hop booking at South by Southwest Music Festival a couple weeks ago, and he was basically said what you just said in other words, which was, it's great if somebody has 100,000 likes, but if they have no comments and no engagement, you start to question, like, what's the value?
Fake followers.
But if they have 10,000 followers and those followers are rabid fans and they're commenting and they're engaged and they want to they want to be a part of, the movement or whatever, or the music, whatever it ends up being, then that's more valuable in a way. So it's quality. It's not quantity. Certainly a lot of big brands are still looking for, and they're working with media budgets, they're working with advertising budgets. They need to prove, that they reach 10 million people, and I think that there's a value there. It's important, but to really look at like who those people are and reaching the right people, and is I think the right way for brands to actually make a difference, to improve perception of their brand, to increase sales of their product. And if we're engaging in a hip hop world with a, I don't know, a crowd that's a totally different genre, a heavy metal crowd, it just may not resonate with most. So really knowing your audience is really important. And brands are getting smarter and smarter about the ways that they do engage. And I feel like big brands are being more open-minded and listening to the sort of on-the-street, grassroots, real artists more than they used to, as opposed to back in the day, their big brands would be, hey, we're going to give you this much money, and then we want you to do X, Y, and Z. Whereas now I think there's more like two-way collaboration and engagement, and I'm hopeful that continues, because I think that for the music industry, for the creatives out there, but also for the consumers, all of us are consumers that want a better life experience and a better entertainment experience, it's going to pay off big time, and we're going to be in a better place because of it.
No, I agree with you. And when it comes down to speaking again, it's just to touch back on a topic about better life experience. I cannot iterate enough how important it is that this whole like mining of this data, this whole like ability now to like look at the back end on Spotify for artists and see, this is who streamed, this is where they streamed, these are the cities where my artist is most popular, that it really should keep coming back to, though, so how do I serve them? Okay, so now I know who they are and I know where they are, but do I need to know this because I want to serve them better? Because it doesn't become about, that doesn't help you create a great song, right? But it definitely helps you figure out how to get a great song to the right people, to the people who are going to listen, and to the people who are hopefully going to tell the next person and the next person and the next person. And I will absolutely admit that, especially from a management perspective, I do my research. I am pretty intense about who I will or won't manage, and by the grace of God, now I manage this kind of crazy guy named Wyclef. So I get a lot of calls. Will you manage me? And I'm guilty of doing the research. Like, I'm guilty of trying to sort out like what's real and what's smoke and mirrors, and trying to keep it authentically about talent first. I'm managing a woman right now that when I started managing her, she had like maybe 3,000 followers on Instagram, and it was just purely about the talent. But if someone comes along who's got like hella personality and maybe not the voice that this girl has, that I think like could be it, then that's when I really start paying attention to the other stuff. So I'm guilty of it, but I don't consider it a bad thing. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure. It just answers the big question: does it serve me as an indie label and as a manager? Like 1,000%, it's absolutely necessary now.
You just touched on something that I think is really critical, in that the old school model for music industry is A&R guy has a good, or gal has a great feeling about an artist, and they think they're going to be the next thing. Yeah. And what I think we have to be careful of is not getting so down the rabbit hole of technology that we lose track of the actual entertainment value.
Actual talent.
So finding that sweet spot in the middle, I think, is a critical aspect. So I think the old school model, it's an emotional driver, is critical. Yeah. But technology should be helping us to understand talent more and understand who's really moving the needle more. So technology should be helping humanity. Humanity should not be reduced because technology is taking away our processing and our opinions.
You said it earlier, it shouldn't replace humanity. It shouldn't. When this young girl came to me, she didn't sing for me at first. She just told me her story. I was invested before she sang, right? And then she sang. And I didn't work with Wyclef yet. And this just, it brings it full circle, like why what you're saying is so real and so important about like where technology meets humanity in music. The story that she told me before she ever sang, her mom, who had just passed away, used to sing this one song to her every single day. Someone please call 911. And like there was no connection in the sense of Wyclef because I didn't work with him yet. I was only working with her. And then she sang an Emily Sandé song, and it blew me away. It was amazing. And the point at which I did start to work with Wyclef, I took her as a surprise to her to meet this person whose song her mom had sung to her, you know, for all these years. And she sang for him, and you know, and the rest is history. But the fact that her story moved me almost to the place of wanting to sign her before I knew she had an amazing singing voice is that humanity that like technology just can't replace. And there's not enough data mining in the world that would have or could have let me know this kid with no followers on her social media or anything would turn out to be who I think is a superstar, and she's well on her way. So absolutely, it should never replace it. There always has to be the human aspect.
Yeah, I agree. If technology is not enhancing the experience, the human experience, in my opinion, it's a fail. Like it's human experience, making a better experience first, having a better entertainment experience, and technology should be supporting that, not the other way around. There are probably a lot of developers and coders and other people that might debate that, but if we're not, having a great experience in our lives and with entertainment, then I think we're missing, certainly as it pertains to music.
I have a question, but I will first see if we have like 5 minutes left, so we were going to see if anybody in the audience had any questions before, because I can text them later with my question. So since you don't have their numbers, does anyone in the audience have a question that they want to ask? Yes, sir, what's your name? Where are you from? No, it's coming for you.
Yo, my name is Wyclef Jean. Yeah. So I have a question real quick. So my question is to Madeline Nelson. In your humble opinion, you are one of the greatest managers you have worked with, from Teddy Riley, Michael Jackson, Jay-Z, J. Cole, all of us. I know Michael Jackson gave you a personal letter. Like you're one of the only people that got a personal letter from Michael Jackson. You see how quiet the room got once I said that? So can you tell us what was that letter that Michael Jackson wrote to you? Because we all would like to know. As a manager, and Michael Jackson was a visionary, so we just want to know what was in the letter.
That's private.
Thanks, Wyclef. The letter from Michael. All right. I have to try to make this like long story pretty short. I worked with Michael for 18 months. It was an amazing, amazing time. I got to travel with him for the whole 18 months. We worked on this album called Invincible. I got to A&R the album and do all kinds of other fun stuff on the project. But when I was done, there was something I wanted to do. I wanted to go work with this guy named Doug Morris, who at the time was CEO at Universal. And Michael was shooting a video, I think for Blood on the Dance Floor, for Blood on the Dance Floor, shooting with Chris Tucker and doing all this amazing stuff. And I was fortunate enough that I literally could just pick up the phone and call Michael. And I called and I said...
That's pretty legit. That's pretty real.
I'm blushing because I don't tell the story ever. Thanks, Wyclef, again. And I called and I said, I need this letter and I need it by this day. And the woman that worked for him was named Evelyn. And he said, oh, just tell Evelyn and we'll get it done. And a few days later, Evelyn called and said, hey, like what needs to be in the letter? And I said, well, it's a letter of recommendation. I don't want to tell him what needs to be in it. And then Evelyn attempted to write the letter. And Michael stopped shooting so that he could write the letter himself. He didn't want it to look like his assistant wrote it. He wrote the letter. He wrote this recommendation letter. I just still didn't get the job. I don't know if because he was a Sony artist. I don't know. But the way the universe works is that 10 years later, Doug Morris, now leaving Universal and going to Sony Music. I was working for Donna Karan at the time. I had my come to Jesus, like it's time to get out of the music business before I break down. And I was working for Donna, and Doug asked me to come to work for him at Sony as a senior vice president. It was going to be the highest position I would have held at one of the labels. But I said, no, like I can't do that to Donna. I'm in a contract, can't do it. And this went on for 6 months. And then I was digging through some letters, old recommendation letters from people, because I was putting together a portfolio because I was trying to buy a house. So I wanted to impress people. Like, here's all these people that think I have a great reputation. And I came across the letter from Michael. And I looked
You
at
just
the
happen
date.
to remember, oh, wait, Michael wrote me a letter.
Michael Jackson wrote me a letter.
Jackpot.
I looked at the date, and the date that he wrote the letter was exactly 10 years earlier than the day I found the letter. And that morning, I had just said what I thought was my final no to Doug and to going to Sony. And I stared at it, and I just had a moment. And I circled the date, and I scanned it, and I sent it over to Jane in Doug's office, and I said, give this to Doug, tell him to look at the date, tell him I said, yes, I'll do it. So it was like, Michael was still like, I'm gonna cry. Like he was still like looking out for me, if that makes sense. Because that position at Sony was like me getting my master's degree in the music business, and Sony was the label that Michael was on when he wrote it, and there's all these weird like universe things that I believe were the reason I found that letter on that day, on that exact 10-year day later. But that's the story. He wrote it for me to work for the man that I ended up working for 10 years later. It was insane, full circle type of thing.
It's people connection,
Yeah.
humanity,
Yeah.
music and technology can support all that, but it's all about connection, music, entertainment, being
Yeah.
human and connected.
I feel like such a crybaby.
That's amazing.
I always
It's
cry
awesome.
when I talk about him.
I didn't know the story. That's wonderful. Everyone, right?
That was fucking cool. You can clap for that one. Oh, I'm not supposed to swear. I'm sorry. Oops.
My ears are red.
Yeah. That small thumping sound you hear is my heart fangirling over Madeline Nelson all over again. We do have time for one more question. Does anybody have one? Does anybody else have one? Otherwise, I have one. Oh, I'm picking me. For sure, nobody has one? Okay, it's me. My question is, I know you've touched on the human versus automation element, and you're saying that human connection and that humans still need to have their fingers in the pot. What do you think the trend will be with data mining and music and brands moving forward? I know the two of you are saying you want to do your research and you want to find those authentic connections, but what do you see as the trend in the future with data mining and the music biz?
I have a thought that's related, but maybe not an exact answer.
That's okay. I
And
won't be mad.
So on my way over here today, I spoke with the head of South by Southwest Music Festival, and we talked about artists and how they leverage the opportunity at events like South by Southwest and other events, North by Northeast here in Toronto and more. And a lot of what we talked about maybe 8 or 10 different things, came back to artist motivation, their interest in learning, and their willingness to understand the business aspect of music. And a lot of artists, I love them, and I was one back in the day, but are sort of stuck so much in their creativity. It's really hard to sort of stand on both sides of the fence. So Wycliffe, like for instance, is like, this is a person that's like very creative, but he also understands the business aspect. And most artists, I think, maybe don't have a foot in both of those places or worlds. Yeah. So they need somebody that understands the business aspect. But more and more, South by Southwest and other events and labels and what have you are asking artists, okay, you've got great music, but what are you doing from a business perspective? How are you going to market your music, your brand, etc.? So that's maybe not exactly an answer to that, but I think it's a really important piece of it because the tools are out there, the information is out there. It's hard to maybe sort through and find the right information. But if artists are driven, if creatives are driven, there's almost all the information is out there. You just really got to go out and do your research and find it, and then continue to talk to people too. Doesn't matter how many Google searches any one of us does. That's going to be helpful, but being here together, having a networking and innovation gathering like this is critical really to advancing the works in tech, in music, and more. And I really, really believe that.
I think that is the answer.
Okay.
That is the answer.
The final word, mic drop. Don't drop the mic though. We're at a tech conference and I'm sure it would bother everybody. I feel like every tech person is like, mic drop, make that not a thing anymore because like mics are expensive. Round of applause for these two wonderful human beings. If you have other questions, you can find them. They're around all day. Maybe a couple days. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
You're welcome.